As you know, flagship devices get a lot of attention, but not everybody buys a flagship device. In fact, in the mid-range, there are millions and millions of handsets sold every year. So if you are going to buy a mid-range device, what mobile processor should you use? Hello there, my name is Gary Sims and this is Gary Explains. Today I want to look at all the different options you have when it comes to mid-range mobile processors, and let's see which one is the best. So if you want to find out more, please let me explain. Okay, so when we're talking flagship, we might be talking about, let's say, a Qualcomm Snapdragon 845, or the latest processor from Samsung in its Exynos range, or the latest Kirin, like the Kirin 980. But when we're talking about mid-range, there's a whole different set of options that are available. Now, when we say a mobile processor, what we really mean is a system on a chip, which means it's made up of various different components, including the CPU, the GPU, there'll be an LTE modem in there, which will allow you to have different transfer speeds for upload and for download. And of course, it's made using a manufacturing process which we measure in nanometers. Now, the lower the nanometers, the better the potential performance and the potential battery efficiency. Now, there are four main players when it comes to the mid-range. Of course, there is Qualcomm with their Snapdragon range, mainly the chips they have in their 600 series. There are a whole bunch of processors available from MediaTek, including their X range and their P range. There are some chips from Samsung, and there are a couple of chips also from Huawei. So I want to look at all these different manufacturers and let's see who offers the best mobile processor for the mid-range. So let's take a look at the different processors that Qualcomm offer in the mid-range. So at the low end of the mid-range, Qualcomm offer the Snapdragon 632. It's an octa-core processor with 4 Cortex A73 cores and 4 Cortex A53 cores. You have a 5th generation Adreno GPU, though a low-end one. You only get support for LPDDR3, that's low power DDR3. It also has an X9 LTE modem, which offers 300 megabits per second download and 150 megabits per second upload. It supports Quick Charge 3, Bluetooth 5, and it's built using a 14 nanometer process. Moving higher up the range, you have the Snapdragon 636, which again has an octa-core setup with Cortex A73 and Cortex A53. There's a slightly better GPU. You've got support now for LPDDR4 RAM, and you have a better modem, which has download speeds up to 600 megabits per second. And then really the top of the range when it comes to the Snapdragon 600 series is the 670, which has got an octa-core configuration, but it's slightly different. Now there are 2 high-performance cores, that's 2 Cortex A75 cores, and 6 energy efficient cores, that's based on the Cortex A55, but they also include a 6th generation Adreno GPU, and then very much the same here for the 670 compared to the 660, LPDDR4 at 1.8 gigahertz. You've got the same X12 modem. However, one important thing is it's built on 10 nanometers. It's also worth mentioning the Snapdragon 710. It's in a series of its own, the 700 series. However, it is very similar to the 670, but just slightly better. For example, the 2 Cortex A75 cores are clocked at 2.2 gigahertz compared to 2 gigahertz. The Adreno is now a 616 compared to a 615. And there is also a better LTE modem, giving you the possibility of up to 800 megabits per second download. And it's also built on the same 10 nanometer manufacturing process. And if we look at the relative performance of the Snapdragon processors, we can see the 710 is the best, the 670 is next, the 660 after that, and then so on as you go down the range. So basically, the higher the number, the better overall performance you're going to get. So basically, as you go through the range, at the lower end of the mid-range, you've got slightly weaker CPUs, you've got slightly weaker GPUs, you've got support for only DDR3, LPDDR3 memory, and you've got that weaker LTE modem. As you go up through the range, then you have better CPU, better GPU, better memory support, better LTE modems, and of course built on a much newer fabrication process. So Qualcomm isn't the only company that offers mid-range mobile processors. In fact, MediaTek have really made a name for themselves in the mid-range. So let's have a look at some of their processors. So at the bottom of the range, you get the P25, the P23 and the P22, and they are all based on the Cortex A53. So there's no high performance cores here. They're all based on energy efficient cores. And the interesting thing is here is that they all have different GPUs in them. So the P25 has got a Mali T88 with 2 cores. The P23 is actually got a newer GPU core with the ARM Mali G71, again with 2 cores, and the P22 actually uses a GPU from Imagination, that's the Power VR GPU. And as you can see, they've all got kind of very much low-end LTE modems, 300 megabits a second download, 150 megabits per second upload, and they're all built on the 16 nanometer process, except for the P22, which has actually gone down to a 12 nanometer process. But more interesting is the P60 and the X30. Now the P60 has got 4 Cortex A73 cores and 4 Cortex A53 cores. So that's similar to what we were finding in some of the Qualcomm processors. It's got a 3-core Mali G72 GPU and has still got that similar kind of LTE modem, but now on 12 nanometers. But if you want the best of the mid-range that MediaTek have to offer, then you go with the X30. And this is actually a deca-core setup, so there are 10 cores. There are 2 Cortex A73 cores, then there are 4 Cortex A53 cores, then there are 4 Cortex A35 cores. Now the A35 is even more power efficient than the A53, really designed for that kind of eking out that last bit of energy from the battery. And they actually also use there in that processor another variant of the Power VR GPU from Imagination. Importantly, there is a better LTE modem in there. You've got 450 megabits per second download speed, and it's made on 10 nanometers, which really is an advanced process node for a mid-range processor. And if we look at the relative performance of those processors, we can see that the X30 is clearly the winner, then the P60, and then basically between the P22, the P30, the P23 and the P25, it's all very much of a muchness. The P22 is actually slightly better because it's built on that newer process node. However, there isn't really much between them. Samsung also have a range of processors they offer for the mid-range. So let's have a look at those. So starting at the bottom with the Exynos 5 Hexa 7872, that's a hexa-core processor. You've got 2 Cortex A73s, 4 Cortex A53s. It's only got a 1-core Mali G71 GPU, so gaming performance is going to be fairly low here for 3D gaming. For things like Candy Crush and things like that, it really won't make any difference. And you have 14 nanometer manufacturing process. Going up further, you've got 2 octa-core processors, the 9610, which has got 4 Cortex A73 and 4 Cortex A53, Mali G72 with 3 cores, and the Cat12 modem, which gives you 600 megabits a second, and it's built at that 10 nanometer process. And then you've got the 7885, which has got 2 Cortex A73 cores and 6 Cortex A53 cores, similar to what we found at the upper end of the Snapdragon range. And then you've got the Mali G71 with 2 cores, but you've got that same LTE modem at 600 megabits per second, but built on a 14 nanometer process. And then our final company is Huawei with their Kirin range. They also have some processors aimed squarely at the mid-range. At the bottom end, you've got the Kirin 659, which is basically an octa-core Cortex A53 setup, so you're not looking at any high performance cores there. You've also got the aging Mali T830 GPU, and it's built at 16 nanometers. However, the Kirin 710 is a different story. Here you have 4 Cortex A73 cores, that's the high performance cores, 4 Cortex A53 cores, and then you have the Mali G51 MP4. And the G51 is specifically designed for the mid-range. It tries to keep that performance level up high, but it also offers great power efficiency. You've also got a Cat12 LTE modem at 600 megabits per second and the 12 nanometer manufacturing process. So I've put together a graph of the relative performance across CPU and GPU for all these different processors, and let's see who comes out on top. So at the top you have the Snapdragon 710. It's almost cheating because it's really in a series of its own, nestled there between the 600 series and the 800 series. Below that you have the MediaTek X30 and the Snapdragon 670 and the Snapdragon 660 and the Kirin 710, all offering relatively similar performance. Then bang smack in the middle there you have the P60 and the Exynos 7 Octa 7885. Again, both of those offering a similar performance. Once you go below that into the Snapdragon 636, into the Exynos 5, into the Kirin 659, and then into those MediaTek chips, you really are getting down to the bottom end of the mid-range. And you can see quite a difference there between, let's say, the P23 and the P25 and the X30 and the Snapdragon 710. So hopefully using that graph and using the information I've given you there, when you're looking to buy your next smartphone, you can quickly see which processor is better in one handset compared to another, and hopefully that will give you a better overall user experience. Hey there, my name is Gary Sims and this is Gary Explains. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. Also, please don't forget to subscribe and do hit that bell notification icon so that you get told every time I drop a new video. Okay, that's about it. I'll see you in the next one.